So in 2015, I was very scared about applying for the labs, but there was a line of text in there that said, like, we especially encourage women to apply. And I was like, okay. So that's me, so I guess I can apply. And then I went, and I think something had been fermenting, which was this desire to work with code and maybe learn to program, because I knew people around me who were doing that. And then at MTF, I saw a pharmacist master Python in 24 hours, you know, to the extent that he could take in data from a sensor and like make something musical out of it. And I was really impressed by that. So at that time, I still had to complete my master's thesis. And so I kind of set myself a trap, which was that I would create like an art piece or an artistic production as part of my master's thesis in art education in code. And so this was all inspired by MTF. And so yeah, this 6 years on, 6 years on, we, if you look at my presentation, it is actually a website. So this is my website. I just click there, and it actually opens in the browser. And my website, my presentation, actually, this is my presentation. It's HTML code. so I kind of selected JavaScript and HTML, CSS as my programming language, because I like the idea of using the browser as a platform. Because then I thought, well, my work is always going to be, you know, available on the internet, and I don't have to constrain myself to gallery spaces and things like this. And so I'm going to show you the work that I've done since then, which I think is kind of situated within a realm known as maybe digital language arts or electronic literature. So it's like a practice of using words and texts, maybe poetry, and with some form of computation or digital things. And there's a community called the Electronic Literature Organization, which I very much identify myself with. So that piece that I started conceiving after MTF came out of this period of time that we experienced in Europe in 2015 with all these migrants from Syria and the Middle East coming to Europe. And a tent was set up for them to take refuge in near my house. And I was somehow very touched by everything that was going on and moved. And it made me think about why some people's migratory movement is so constrained while mine is not. And I ended up working with this community of volunteers who work with these refugees or asylum applicants. And at that time, there was all this talk in the public sphere about like why we shouldn't have these people here. And I was really sick of hearing all of that. And I thought, like, I want to document, you know, the other side or like another perspective on this phenomenon, which is this whole movement of volunteers who choose to spend time with these people and want to help them get like as good a start as possible within these immense constraints. And so I came up with this piece, which was basically about why people choose to help asylum applicants. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to choose like 8 people, and these 8 people, they're going to give me 8 reasons for why they help. Like, I help because, and so on. And then I would cut up those reasons into subject, object, verb, like very roughly, and then create like a simple button that you press, and when you press it, it just recombines these parts of speech, these subjects, objects, and verbs, to create infinite reasons for helping migrants. So I was really into this 8. On its side is infinity. And so what I did was I organized some dialogical workshops within the community of volunteers, where we spoke about why we help, and there were some other aspects to those workshops as well. But one of the components was then for everybody to share their reasons. And so we sat around a table, everybody wrote down 8 reasons, and then we passed the microphone around, and I recorded their reasons. And then, then I sat down and started learning JavaScript, which was big challenge. I remember one time, for instance, spending 24 hours trying to solve a problem, like, why isn't this working? And I couldn't figure it out. It was literally over 24 hours. And, looking at Stack Overflow and trying not to ask my programmer brother for help until like the very last minute. And then finally I realized, wow, the function I am using is asynchronous. There's this thing in web programming called asynchronous processes, which means because the browser is kind of having to ask for data that it doesn't have like saved locally, it has to ask for that data, and then it has to wait until the data arrives. And once it arrives, that's when it can process it. And I was trying to use that data before it was even there already, and so on. But actually, this is a very foundational programming principle in web programming, and I kind of learned it the hard way, but I learned it, and it was really, really cool. So this is the work. It's a button called "Give me a reason," and it speaks German.
Ich helfe, weil ich es Fremden und Familienangehörigen
sein will.
Sorry, I'm going to translate this to English for you, for your convenience after.
Ich helfe,
Weil ich finde, eine neue Ort
wichtig finde.
Nope. So I help because I find a new place important.
Ich helfe, weil es mich meine eigene Sichtweise geben werden.
I help because it allows me to live my own point of view.
Ich helfe, weil ich allein freuen kann.
I help because I can be happy alone.
Ich helfe, weil ich eine tolle Helfergruppe war.
I help because I was a great support group.
Ich helfe,
Weil ich
etwas zur Mittel zu haben.
I help because I have mediated something. So, the button is very philosophical. Sometimes it behaves, sometimes it doesn't, but I was really intrigued by this, infinite recombinations of these real concepts that people use to describe their behavior and involvement with the refugees. So after this work, this is MTF story part 2. I went to MTF lab, MTF in Berlin, and there I met, short version, Franziska Kika, who presented the Icarus project the other day. And then it turned out I had a trip planned to Porto like 2 weeks after I met her, and turns out she's from Porto. So I met up with her, and I was thinking of doing a PhD, and I was going to do it in Finland, in the known, but then it turns out half of her crowd was doing a PhD in digital media. And somebody said, why don't you come do it here? And I was like, right, okay. And then I applied, I was accepted, I got a scholarship, and so on. Things just kind of fell into place. So then I ended up doing my PhD, which I defended in June of this year in Porto. So now I'm participating here, and MTF kind of encapsulates my PhD in a strange kind of way, and I'm very grateful for it. And actually, I want to say that also I'm very grateful for Michela for stressing the importance of female participation in this, because it has had a very real impact in my life. And I see it also as something that is blossoming into my future work, past the doctorate also. So then my PhD, if I have time to explain all of this, was very much motivated still by this thinking about migration. And in this, this is not an animation, this is programmed, so these circles that I'm kind of obsessed with are illustrating my point, which is this green circle here is a person who's not allowed to move very much in their life. They're kind of restricted to this white bar on the sides of the screen. And now please move a little bit more, because this colorful one, this is me. I'm not restricted, I'm actually allowed to move everywhere. So the green one gets stuck there at the border, but the blue one, go. Not behaving very well. Go. Yes, past this. Well, anyways, yes, go, good. So this one is allowed to go anywhere. And this was kind of my motivation, because obviously it's a very complex question, but I was very intrigued to try to understand why this is. So in my PhD, I presented the motivation of my doctoral work as a poem, which was one of the artistic research methods I employed. So this poem relates to that period when I was helping the refugees, and I took one refugee boy, my age, to a job interview, and wrote this a few months afterwards at the start of my PhD. We sat on a park bench talking about his future, his options, his meager options after an interview I had organized. Me and him suddenly jolted out of structures, out of the tent and the camp, out of our roles of the refugee and the volunteer. A young woman and a young man sitting on a park bench, talking about his future, and I thinking about mine. His options, my options. His meager options, my ample options, after an interview I had organized. Me and him, why and how are we so different? A young woman and a young man on a park bench talking about the future. So that was, thank you. And I mean, obviously there's definitely questions of privilege involved. There's questions also of race. This was a dark-skinned boy from Pakistan. There's also, of course, a class difference. But, when we were sitting there, I was just thinking, fundamentally, though, we are just two bodies, on this same piece of land on planet Earth. And it was strange to me that there was such an invisible force acting on his body that just wanted to expel him from that place. And this struck me. So anyhow, I started kind of an artistic process where I started to think about this theme from various angles. And in my readings, I came across this text by a political philosopher called Joseph Cairns in a book called The Ethics of Immigration, where he argues very much for the right for people to move freely as a way of balancing out global inequalities. And there's this piece of text that I found very interesting in his work, because this is an academic text, yet he wrote this piece of prose. And this piece of prose, where he's kind of quoting himself, is this imaginary thing that he says in the Second World War. These are some reasons that people moderately against Jewish refugees may have said when they spoke with each other about why we shouldn't take all these Jewish refugees in, which is what happened the world over. Jewish refugees were pushed back, were not always taken in. And it goes what is happening to the Jews is too bad, but it's not our fault. We have our own problems. If we take in all the Jews who want to come, we will be overwhelmed. There are simply too many of them, and so on. And I found this text really intriguing. This is not scientific text. These are not real documented reasons, but there are so many echoes of what I was hearing at that time in this text that I thought, okay, I want to work with this text somehow. And so Joseph Cairns goes on to argue then, after the Second World War, when the world as a whole realized what happened to the Jews in Nazi Germany, a lot of these reasons for these moderately opposed people were just, no longer had any value because there was basically genocide going on. And if there's genocide going on, you know, what is too many? Like, how many do you leave to be killed off? These lose a lot of their foundation. So I made this piece where I kind of hate this piece, and I don't even want to really share it because it's horrible. But I'm going to frame it so that you might see where I was going with this piece and not think exactly the opposite of my motives. So I saw that text and I thought, I want to kind of make the point of how these reasons are similar or the same the world over, no matter what the refugee situation or context or country or country of origin, country of destination, and so on. And because I was intrigued with the use of voice and synthetic voice and speaking to the computer as a form of interaction, I came upon this idea of using synthetic voices to kind of suscitate, bring forth the idea of a foreign person. So, some people know what it sounds like when a German person speaks English and so on. So then when you hear that, you kind of think, oh, that's a German person. So what I did was I used the same text, which is more or less what Karen's wrote. And my program selects randomly some reasons, yet always selects a different linguistic accent to kind of just represent this idea of how these essentially xenophobic reasons for not accepting migrants tend to be similar the world over.
Let's listen to why we cannot take them all. Now, choose a nationality by saying, for example, I am from Poland.
I am from Poland.
Admitting them does not help solve the HE problems they have at home. And we cannot take them all, not all of them.
I am from Canada.
They have led to immigration officials, and we cannot take them all, not all of them.
I am from Mexico.
They have led to our immigration officials, and we cannot take them all, not all of them.
I am from Portugal.
They have led to our immigration officials, and we cannot take the ILL, not ILL of them.
I am from India.
We have an obligation to look out for our own needy first. And we cannot take them all, not all of them.
Yeah. So I don't want to speak more about that piece. But anyhow, I thought it was interesting how that notion of those other foreign peoples is suscitated through the synthetic voice. But I think the problem I have with that work is that it just represents xenophobia. It doesn't come at this problem with this healing and loving angle. So it's just not nice. But the second work I did was still working much to do with this same idea of human migratory movement as a way of balancing out global inequalities. And so in this work, I kind of got really into this idea of maybe a little bit also like my circles there, like that of human beings being like single entities of like one large species, which is, so I started thinking of humans as particles, which I know not everybody likes very much, but I wanted to kind of zoom out and try to see how our behavior, migratory behavior, could look like from above. So in this work, these particles are all born into their own zones, and then these things appear that you might actually be looking for in life. And then I can drive this U around to its needs, and you'll see all these others also driving themselves around to meet their needs, and my score is increasing. And then, however, at some point, what may happen, as just now happened, is that the rules of who gets to go where change. And let's see if I can go. So I can no longer go. I'm stuck in this blue zone. Okay, I can go in the green. the purple and the blue. Can I get more love? Yes, yes. Work? Yes. So I'm lucky because, you know, those opportunities happen to spring up where I was allowed to go. And so essentially here, there's different rules for borders, and I can try to change them, saying, I see a door. But if I try that, so there's this opportunity to speak out, but it doesn't do anything. I may want to go. So then there's this, even though there is this kind of randomly appearing restrictions on movement, I can speak out and by reading out these things, and therefore change the rules of migration. Also problematic, I'm very critical of my own work. This is also very problematic because, yes, although it might be true that borders are a human-made social agreement, and as such negotiable, there is always this problem of who gets to speak. So, I mean, I guess my work is kind of an ideal world because maybe those people who are not able to go where they want to go, however much they speak, nothing is going to change in order to let them move where they want. So it's a bit problematic, but nevertheless, in this work, I was kind of toying with this dynamic between one's own desires, which put often forth a process of migratory movement, however small or big, and this idea of border rules as being something that are always changing and as such negotiable. Just to kind of call attention to how the way that we manage migration today might seem like it's fixed and static, but things such as the passport institution are actually like barely 100 years old. So we can still negotiate the ways we manage human migratory movement for the whole species. So, I'm gonna have to refresh this so that you can see. So then basically, this is now me on my own migratory trajectory across a border, motivated by this pursuit of the PhD. And this, my own migratory movement also made me, feel some things, namely, although it was a migratory trajectory which I made by choice, I nevertheless found myself really missing home and feeling this very ambivalent feelings of enjoying where I am, yet at the same time feeling so rooted and so, saudades is this Portuguese word, which is perfect for it, just this deep, longing for those places. And I was collaborating with a group of artists towards a bio-art exhibition. This is actually not my work, and I'm so sorry there's no subtitle, but this is the work of Melanie Saranto. And as I watched her work, she was growing these sunflower seeds on felt sculptures that she made, which ended up looking like this lovely thing on the wall. This is my work here. I was really struck by how she was growing these seeds in like in a ground that was definitely not their kind of place of origin or birth. And these seeds were somehow, nevertheless, thriving and growing. And then I started to think of myself through these metaphors of the plant and the roots and the, growing in Portugal, even though this is not my native land and so on. And finally, I began to kind of, in a very hopeful way, see myself as a rhizome, where I kind of reconciled with this longing for other places through this idea of perhaps, my roots are still there as well, and here, and in all those other places I've left behind. And what is the me here in Portugal right now is just another shoot growing up from that invisible part of my organism, which is underground. And so this evolved into a work that I call Transplanted, where I essentially recorded myself making some of these observations about these ambivalent things I feel, and then again using the computer as my kind of co-creator for making these combinatorial poems about this thing where like different kinds of perspective again like collide to perhaps create new meanings. So this is spoken in Finnish, but I have English subtitles. But I'll demo the first one in Finnish. Miksi olen täällä? On täällä kyllä kotoisaa. Tammikuussa appelsiineja. Tunnen kuuluvani tänne. Ihmisiä tietenkin kaipaa. Ai miten? Why am I here? Niin miksi? Miksi olen täällä? What do I most miss? Miksiköhän? What do I most miss? Mutta jospa... There's also this infinity mode where it just kind of goes on forever, musing about these things. Niin, ja metsässä kuuluu meren pauhu. On täällä kyllä kotoisaa. Löydän täältä järven. Mikä minut tänne toi? Yhtä lailla elän tässä maassa. Muutinko? I'll leave it in the ocean. So that artistic research process, basically, I listed a couple of things that it sort of revealed to me through the process of making these works and thinking about these thoughts. And so some of the things are, I somehow find my way to decolonial thinkers, which I, wish I had kind of come upon a little bit earlier along in the research process, but nevertheless it was like for me personally, to grow as a thinker was very important, nevertheless, to find these perspectives in the end. Also notions of pluriversality, the idea of listening to and looking consciously for non-Western, non-European, and non-white knowledges, or indigenous knowledges, and also looking to ecofeminisms to answer some of these questions that I had. And so, what else? As you have already gotten to know my circles and spirals, which should actually be moving around here, but for some reason are not. That's another thing I'm working on right now. And I've brought them here with me because I do invite you to, if you feel so inclined, to engage with them and to use them any way you want this week in your work. And can I just show one thing that I brought? Okay. So, Daber might remember this from Ljubljana, because actually my participation at MTF in 2015 really put in motion quite a lot of waves, it almost seems like, and this was one of them. So one of the organizers or co-organizers of the MTF in Ljubljana is called Micha Siglar, and I'm not even sure if he has the company anymore, but at that time at least was working on this. It's called the Akku Spade. And so I ended up doing some kind of consulting work for him, taking him to BMW in Munich with his product. This is like a ultra-directional, directional ultrasound speaker. So like ultrasound is used as a carrier wave for the audio signal. Can some of you hear this? It is very directed, yes. It's a very narrow beam of sound. We can play and test, I'm not sure. Oh, you mean this? I'm not selling it. You can speak with Miha. Excuse me? No, bass, it doesn't do bass very well, or it doesn't do bass. So that's it, thank you.